Thank you, everyone. I'm Anthea Coggan. I'm an environmental economist at the CSIRO. And there's no cheat screen here, so I'm going to do a lot of looking at the thing. So today I wanted to talk to you about how we've been applying an extended system of environmental economic accounting for ecosystem accounts, which is affectionately called SEEA, to try and understand the minefield of data that exists out there about how people use the reef and how they benefit from this use. Okay, so this is a integrated monitoring and reporting project funded by the Reef Trust Partnership, and is a collaborative project between the CSIRO, James Cook University and CQU. That is on the right hand side is the Seaborn team. It's a fairly fluid team, so not everybody is still in the team, but we've been also working really closely with the Reef Authority because one of the objectives of this research is to be useful in management decision making. So we've been working really closely with the Marine Park Authority, particularly Cindy Huchery, Michelle Dyer and Sally Harnham. So this is about sustainable use and benefits, and we gave this project a groovy name, Seaborn, so that we could actually market it in amongst the IMR projects. There are two objectives to this work. One of them was trying to address one of the gaps with the Reef 2050, which was about better understanding of how people are using the reef and what benefits are generated from that use. So reporting up to that Reef 2050 plan, and secondly, to support on-ground management decision making. And I feel that we've probably worked closer to that objective of influencing or helping with the on-ground decision making, probably more so than the reflecting back to Reef 2050, but that's there as well. I'm hoping it all just ties together in the end. We have less than a year left on this project. So today I'm really wanting to talk about the framework that we use to look at data. So when we started out on this project, we sort of had a top-down and a bottom-up approach to this. And when we're thinking about bottom-up, we set out to have a look at what data exists, so existing data about who's using the reef and how they're using it and the benefits. So we needed data about who's using, how are they using the reef, and then what are the benefits and values that are being generated from this use, and where are those benefits flowing to? Who's actually getting that benefit? So it sits in here with the reef knowledge system, RIMREP. So we're discovering existing data. Oh, jeepers, that's not going to go well. And creating a framework for turning this data into information. And this was a term that was coined by Cindy Huchery. Like, you can have data, but if you don't actually know why you have that data or what you're going to use that data for, then it's really not very useful. So actually, how do we turn data into information? And that was a really big aha moment in our project, really. So at one stage, we went out and had a look at all these data sets, and there was over 280 data sets that just sort of looked at that use and benefits. It looked a little bit like this. We started thinking about it in terms of a kitchen with ingredients, and what do we do with all of these ingredients? It's just a big pile of stuff. So, this is the way this has come across on the slides is really not great. Okay, never mind. But so with that big list of ingredients, or that big pile of ingredients, we don't actually know what this information is about. Often, where is it located? How was it collected? So what quality is this data in? And so one part of the Seaborn project is discovering and describing this existing information. And this is to go into the data management system that Eduardo spoke about in an earlier session today. And secondly, jeepers, that's really not working. And secondly, to create a framework to look at this data and use this data for answering questions. So taking this data and turning it into information. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So that framework. Welcome, Di. Di's on the team. Okay, so the SEEA framework. I don't know that many of you would be familiar with this framework. It's a United Nations big framework that's being used across a number of countries. that basically, and you can't read that at all, it creates, so first of all, what are the ecosystems that you have? So it's a condition and extent. You start with condition and extent. What's there and what quality is it in terms of your ecosystems? And then quantifying that. And then what does that mean in terms of often dollar value? So the SEEA framework often talks about things in terms of exchange value. But we used this and extended this. So the SEEA framework helped us understand, okay, what is it that we're looking at? So what ecosystems are important in the space that we're looking at? Where? So it gives you a spatial reference to start thinking about where do you need to collect your data from. It gives you a time frame in which to consider your data. And then think about how do those ecosystems create a flow of ecosystem services? Who benefits from that, and how do you quantify or qualify that benefit? And then to who do those benefits flow? And we say that we're extending the SEEA framework because we're trying to also, so we're including households, government and industry in terms of our beneficiaries, but extending that to also think about how benefits flow to First Nations people. And also trying to think about benefits beyond just dollar value, even though if we can get things in dollar value, that is nice because it makes it more comparable to things that are exchanged in dollar value. If you're interested in this, we have a paper, so go and have a look at marine policy for this paper, and it unpacks this in a lot of detail. Okay, so we're calling this an ecosystem service value chain. So when you start to think about what ecosystems, what benefit and to who, that's the flow. It seems really straightforward, but it took a long time for us to come up with this and a lot of looking at all of the data to realize that actually to prioritize the data that we were collecting and providing the information for, we needed to understand the data in terms of this flow. So I'm going to give you one example because I don't think I've got a lot of time left. I'm trying to do my own time as well. 4 minutes left. Okay. So this is a figure that is in this paper. This is how we've taken 10 core ecosystems of the reef, and we know that there's a lot more, but working with Brumpa, they were like, these are the 10 that we really want to focus on. And we had a number of workshops to then go, well, what are the key ecosystem services that are flowing from these ecosystems? And we've categorized them there in terms of provisioning, regulating and cultural services, consistent with other frameworks like Millennium Ecosystem Assessments. And so I'm just going to give you an example of how an ecosystem service value, what an ecosystem service value chain looks like, particularly when you're thinking about what sort of data you might need to populate that value chain. And a really nice, simple example is this fish, wild and farmed biomass provisioning service. Okay, so the ecosystems that go behind this are things like seagrass, meadows, lagoon floors and the water column. And these create the provisioning service of fish, wild and farmed biomass. And this is what our value chain tells us. Okay, this is what the value chain looks like. If we're starting on the far left-hand side there, we've got our ecosystem service of wild and farmed fish. When we think about, okay, so what are do we need to break these down into a number of different components? Remembering that we've got two spatial areas. So we're looking at the Cairns Area Plan of Management and the Keppel's Capricorn Bunkers as our two spatial areas of focus, because the reef is huge and we have constantly with this project trying to bring it back so it's a manageable size. So we're looking at it in terms of, okay, wild caught fish and farm fish. So what sort of data do we need to understand who benefits from that type of service from the reef? So we need to understand the productivity of these fisheries. So therefore we need things like kilograms of fish caught in those different spatial areas, and the data exists. Few fish have a lot of data. And if I had a screen here, I'd be able to jump to other slides to show you what those data sets look like in terms of how they're collected in little spatial areas, but I can't. We then need to understand the commercial value of those fisheries, and ABARES have this data set. And then there's no slides at all. Back. Okay. And then we, to get the economic value of that chain, we can then work out the producer surplus. So we can multiply the kilograms by the dollar value, get the commercial value, and we know that that flows to commercial users. That's a really easy one, really simple. That one's going to be really easy to do. A harder one is this one down the bottom with our cultural services for leisure and recreation. I'm going to just skip through these because this is, we had a workshop last week and this value chain is actually going to look different to this now, but similar type of concept. And I think what's really important to note here is you can see on this far right-hand side that we actually have from the same ecosystem and the ecosystem service, we have two types of end users, which means we need to unpack the data differently, multiply it together differently to get to understand that value chain to those different user groups. Because the way you might understand the value chain to a commercial operator of tourism is different to the way you need to understand the value to a household. So this is why this has been such a really nice lens for us to put over that data, work out which data is a priority to understand that flow of value. Okay, so I have 30 seconds left, perfect. We now have a number of priority ecosystem services to end users that we're now going to populate those value chains for. Our plan is to write these up into a number of little, if you go back to sort of the big pile of ingredients, we're now going to write up the recipes for how you pick out those ingredients, how you report on the quality of those ingredients, and then how you combine those ingredients to turn it into the information that you need to make decisions. Perfect.